Okay, now I'll dive into it. So yes, these are my folks that are working on it. And again, right now I'll talk more about sort of the nuts and bolts of this objective. But of course, so much of ECCN is the content. Because the way we're going to nurture and develop a network is through what we do and how we connect to it. And that's going to hopefully be built out through our work and some of the other objectives that we've done. So this is more nuts and bolts, this first look. So one of the first activity is, as we say, to establish the community of practice. Initially, the bodies had slightly different names. The working group has now become the steering group, which is all of you. Task teams have become these knowledge sharing groups. And then, of course, the advisory group is as I described. And we have already had our launch meeting. Thank you to everyone. Hello, Jen, welcome. Thank you to everyone who attended that and I think really put some good energy out. I really was excited for that launch meeting. We pulled together a planning committee to help develop the initial terms of reference, and we met in early April, I think, to do that. So thank you to those of you who were also part of that activity. And then, as you know, we put forward the call for the steering group and have you here assembled. The piece that we still need to finalize is the advisory group. I think part of me was just waiting to finalize the terms of reference and to have you all together. We'll ask you for any suggestions you might have as well for advisory group members, and hopefully we'll get that pulled together in the next month or so. Looking forward over the next 6 months, we're going to initiate, I think, in earnest, some more of the knowledge share group activities. We'll go into those. We'll initiate a field workshop, as Nina alluded, and we'll plan and facilitate Goal 3 Day for the Education Summit. And certainly we'll look for your input and guidance with some of that. Potential activities for year 2 would be to implement more field-based workshops in 1 to 3 additional Goal 3 countries, and then also to initiate a small grants program, in-kind grants program for knowledge share groups. So a little bit more about those last two. So the field workshops, as Nina described, probably I would say our biggest challenge as a network is to actually make space for meaningful dialogue and sharing and participation at the field level. I don't want it to be lip service, really don't. And that's a challenge. One way to do that is these field workshops that we're considering or planning. They're about 3-day workshops, and the purpose really is to bring people together across organizations in the field. Hear from them about what their current challenges are, what nuts they really would like to crack that just are so busy doing what they're doing that they don't have time to take out a couple of days and think through it. We have a support team here. We can facilitate that discussion. We can bring resources to bear. We can also provide professional development in particular key areas if people in a particular country setting want to go deep in any particular area. And then, just to sort of, again, to build those connections and give people space at the field level. As Nina said, we have one in the works right now for Northern Nigeria. Hopefully that will take place in mid-September. I'm really excited about that. And it'll be a learning process. I think all of this is sort of trying to evolve as we go along.
Can I quickly ask on the first objective there? The build and share knowledge, is there where we are talking about, there is space there to talk about what doesn't work as much as what
Absolutely.
works?
Absolutely.
So that's to me, that's very important.
That is a really good point. And that is very much on the agenda, the more specific agenda that we're working on for Nigeria, particularly with regard to conflict analysis. So, absolutely. And I think hopefully that will be true for all of us. Hopefully we will get to a place where we don't feel that we're just having to be successful all the time, because that's just not real. Yeah. So then the second piece is this grants program, and I look to you as well to help us develop this. Right now this is just here in name. There are two varieties. One is just a broader knowledge development grant. It's open to all of the knowledge share groups, and it's to cover costs related to the development of evidence, tools, guidance, professional development, whatever a knowledge share group feels it needs to kind of advance its agenda. They have to, I think right now, I mean, I'm open to looking at other permutations. I think it has to be an in-kind grant just because of limitations of our contract. The thought is that there would be some sort of template. People would apply to the steering group. The steering group would make the decision. We still then need to sort out how many per year, what the amount is, how long, all of that still needs to be sorted out. A second version would be collaboration grants, and these are targeted now to in-country efforts. So, diverse groups coming together around a common challenge that they're facing. For example, Liberia might have been Ebola. How do we deal with the education challenge in the face of a health crisis like Ebola? And I'm sure there are others. So that's it. I think I want to just take a pause from Jim Rogan.
Sorry I'm late. I could not get a taxi out of the Union Station. I'll be right late.
Maybe you could just say quickly a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm serving in the conflict specialist role, and I have a company that I started after a while at UNICEF, and it's focusing on peace building and conflict sensitivity, social services education, and also on youth. And so happy to be here. And so subcontractor under EEC.
We all agree that since you're going to be buying lunch,
Okay, so this next piece I'm going to turn over to Gwen in a minute, just kind of walk through generally what this activity is. We thought it was really important when we started out this work that we get a sense of where we're at and that we kind of record that and document it so that we can measure our progress and our evolution over time. Both as a sort of backdrop, the broader context sort of the implementing partners in USAID and the broader community, and then take that information and think about what this means for ECCN. Where can we be most effective as a network? And then how can we measure change against that? So in the first quarter, we began conducting interviews. We conducted an online survey. Thank you to everyone who has completed it. If you haven't, it's still up. You can always do it. We'll be checking in with it regularly. In the second quarter, we completed the interviews and shared an initial summary. We were hoping that we would have it finalized to share with all of you today. We're not quite there yet. We need just a little bit more tweaking, but that will be available. And it's an interesting read. And Gwen is going to give a little bit of highlights next. And then what we want to do in the remaining half of this year is then to work together with you to pull out from those findings what this means for our work plan, and also try to set up a learning agenda. What do we actively want to understand better than we do? And that's what the objective is. So I'm going to turn it over to Gwen.
I can sit here. Can you sit here? Oh, the camera. Okay. Okay, so as Cornelia said, I mean, a big part of this stakeholder baseline was number one, to get an idea about how people felt about, broadly speaking, the field of EICC, but also to set a baseline in the way that we might measure progress over time. And so the methodology that we used was a combination of a closed-ended survey online, which again some of you might have taken, which had some options for open-ended responses. And that was the broader ECCN community. A lot of the respondents were those who attended the launch, because it was part of the invitation. And most of them were from IPs, some USAID, some others, but the majority were either technical specialists or managers. But we had a good proportion of program designers and program evaluators. And what we also did was key informant interviews, which were purposefully selected among a group of people who we consider to be experts in a specific area, those areas being field research and so on. And one member of the ECCN support team would call that person or meet in person. We'd have an extended interview where we ask them about the state of the field with respect to that specific area. What are the major issues and problems that we're encountering today? How can we try to change that? And what can ECCN in particular do to try to contribute to that? So, the information that we had, we compiled into a report, which again we haven't shared yet, but some of the top level findings are here. One The cross-cutting findings are with respect to field research, and the big thing that came up in a lot of these interviews and also in the open-ended responses was that there's just insufficient research and evaluation on approaches to education that are effective in increasing equitable access across the board. I mean, there's certain themes that we know a little bit more than others, but generally speaking, we need to build evidence, and that's exactly what we're doing at ECCN. And another cross-cutting finding with respect to professional development was that ECCN members more often want to learn more versus feel able to contribute knowledge. There was one question where, on the survey, where respondents picked a priority area and then said, would you want to learn more or can you contribute knowledge? And far and away, more people said, I want to learn more. So we hope to see over time that more people can contribute knowledge with those particular areas. And then also we found out in the key informed interviews that people do want to learn from one another. So not necessarily be told how it goes in a training seminar, but rather communicate with their colleagues about the experiences that they've had. And then with respect to the priority areas that we identified, a lot of stuff came up, and so we're picking the single sentence big takeaways. But with M&E, we found that existing in-country capacity was limited to actually have viable data to work with and actually conduct those M&E processes. Also, the indicators and tools are inadequate to capture the impact of work in a global context. So we're looking at a dynamic, changing environment. M&E systems that assume things are stable aren't working in goal-free context. With theories of change, and these things we'll get into as when we talk about our objectives. With theories of change, we want to look at emergent, meaning dynamic, flexible theories of change, and also feedback loops with respect to how things are changing on the ground and how might that develop what we're implementing. With respect to conflict sensitivity and peace building, we found that there's conflict analysis tools, there's a lot of stuff out there, but they need to be refined and honed. And we also need more evidence about conflict sensitive education and how it works in what contexts. And finally, with respect to alternative education programs, we're focusing on DRC at this point, but we found across the board there needs to be more attention about knowing who the population group is that we're receiving these programs. How is this program going to be relevant to them? Are we targeting the right people that are the most marginalized? Are we targeting the right number of people? And so on. So, we learned a lot. This will come out in a summary report that we hope to share with all of ECCN, with the big takeaways. And then we hope to see over time these things improving, that we know a little bit more and so on. So are there any questions with that very quick analysis of 120 people?
A quick comment on what we hope to do, what we're going to look to all of you and us to develop is in the same way that for a project you would want to have some sort of a progress monitoring approach. We want to do that here too. How are we going to know that ECCN has made some kind of maybe impact, what the outcomes are of our work? So we still need to develop that, and that's part of, I think, the learning agenda as well as we think through it. So that's work to come.
The third bullet down on conflict sensitivity, peace building, conflict analysis tools need to be refined, agreed completely. But I also see a gap in that the assumption is that the peace building tools need to be refined. But what about the education tools to match that? Because there's a gap when you talk about education. Folks in education don't have the strong knowledge on peace building, and peace building folks don't have the strong knowledge on education. So there's a gap there that needs to be corrected more so than just the peace building tools itself.
Yep.
So I'm trying to see how that can be also very much in this discussion.
Absolutely.
And hopefully when we get to a deeper dive into Objective 4, we can have a whole conversation about that.
Sorry, I'm jumping in.
Yeah, no, it's good, it's good. Okay, go. Okay. Thanks, Rev. Yeah.
I just have one comment to make. I think, thanks Gwen for showing us these findings. I think one thing that we should be grappling with in the steering group is when we use the term research, we need to come to some agreement of what that means to us. There are some very interesting definitions of what is evidence that we use internally in USAID, and really looking at, the RCT, having a randomized control trial is the most sort of the gold standard of evidence. And I just think it's important that we, at some point we come to some, because it figures so prominently in our agenda, that we come to some agreement on what rigor is. Because what we do, there is actually a plethora of information that exists on doing work in this field. The question is, how valuable is that information? How much do we trust it? What were the methodologies used in order to generate that information? I think that's where we fall short, is being able to sift through knowledge and identify which knowledge is most appropriate and what was the rigor used in order to generate it.
This, if I could mention, this comes up in the idea of the application and utilization of knowledge and research, which is surely as large a problem as generated in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very noticeable, actually, as we look across all the programs. So it's...
And we'll get more into that as well. Okay, now we're moving to the communication side of things. Bettina, would you like to come up and take us through?
Do you want to do this?
Oh, sure, I can read this part, yeah. So for this one, this really has to do with how we extend ourselves out. And so in Q1, we were just getting started. We established our logo and branding, see very nice branding we have. We reached out to our initial set of members, which hopefully will continue to grow, and we will look to you as well to help us grow our ranks, also locally. We started the mailings, all that stuff began, website development, etc. Q2 really right now is focusing a lot more on the website and beginning to develop our communication strategy, or having evolved that actually more significantly. Sort of getting the system in place. Looking forward for the next 6 months, it's really now making the website more dynamic. We're sort of just still very much under construction. We feel we have to bring in social media in a constructive way. So thinking about what that means both for all of us who are in the United States, but also what does that mean? What does social media mean, and how does it work for our field-based colleagues? I think it's a different question. And then again, just how we use ICT in a sensible way, given limited connectivity that a lot of our colleagues have. Possible year 2 activities are holding knowledge exchange events online. I think maybe there are webinars, maybe there are other fora that we need to explore. And then building out a resource library, a substantive resource library available on the web that will meet more specific needs of the membership. And we're beginning to gather those things. There's a technical side to it, which is just developing the architecture to make it useful for people. And we're in the process of doing that, and we welcome your suggestions. Okay, so now Bettina, who is our, we didn't introduce you.
I can do that
Oh
right.
dear.
Hello, everybody.
This is Bettina Dembek.
I'm Bettina Dembek. You can actually stay here. I'll just take the seat here. And I'm helping on the ECCN support network on the communication side and the platforms, whether that's like on the digital side or some of the events we're hosting. And I think you have seen some of our platforms this morning already, like appearing here in the background with our WebEx. We're trying to get our colleague connected from Mexico, and so hopefully we'll hear from her later. But just to give you an idea, it's like, so we have the website, as Cornelia said, is already up. It's there to kind of be our hub and our navigation kind of portal where we're going to try to connect all the other things. And it has obviously a public site where we're going to have different general information. It's already up there in rudimentary form, where we introduce ourselves and where we hopefully feature more news items. There's an ongoing kind of stream that comes through here. And we also have a blog and a Twitter feed in those components. On the right-hand side, that's more important for us here. This is where we get into the more dynamic and the interactive section of the website. And it's like we're trying to have all of that in a more private side of the website, so there's a login required. And maybe we can get a chance to talk a little bit more about that, because for me, as on the technical side, it's like what does it take for somebody to pass that hurdle? What kind of information do we want to gather for these people? And who do we allow behind the firewall or behind the login? Because behind the firewall we have discussion boards where maybe we will all communicate a little bit, ask some questions, some critical questions, try to find answers. So some of that work is work in progress and might not be ready for the public, so we can't really push it to the public side. We will also talk about the repository, the ECCN resources. Some of them might not be ready for the public, so we want to keep them behind the login. There are member profiles, so you'll see, we'll ask all of you in an email soon to create such a profile. There's contact information, which we will hope that you find helpful to reach out to one another as your peers. But we don't want to, again, share that too much with the public. So it becomes really crucial to figure out who is an ECCN member and who is not. And we've got the terms of references, that gives us some guidelines. And it says, it's everybody from USAID who is an implementing partner. But then it opens it up a bit more to research people. And so if I'm the person and I'm getting an email from somebody, how do I know that they make the pass or not? I mean, if it's somebody from USAID, it's probably more easy, or maybe I'll reach out to Nina and say, okay, but what do I do if I have a Tony Miller signing up from some institution and he says he's a researcher interested in conflict? Does that mean I'm going to grant him access? So that's a question, it's like we've been mulling over, and it's like if there's any input or any thoughts on that, I would really appreciate it, because it's a tricky one. As you can see, a lot of it goes into place based on that assumption. And then we have the M&E database, which will be another big component. And it's like, I don't know whether we talk a little bit more about that later. We are.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get too far into it, but just to give you an idea, so we have different platforms to work with. The website here, you see our URL link there, and we have also an email address, so if you want to use that, it's in your slides as well. So far we have about 900 different users, so thinking about it, we really haven't publicized the site yet. Having 900 users is a pretty good number, for a website that is pretty much dormant out there, and we didn't push it, in other words. So roughly we get about 50 hits a day right now, and so we're really hoping to get that geared up as we get more content and more worthwhile things going, especially on the interactive side than behind the login. But in addition, you've experienced that already. We've got the MailChimp newsletters going out, and now even our USAID colleagues get it, I hope. It's like we had a couple of viable things here too. I hope all of you get it. If not, please send us an email. We'll also have more subscribe buttons then available, so if you have any of your members in your organizations who should be subscribing to that, just forward it, and we'll have a possibility for them to subscribe.
Bettina, I have some really good feedback for you, so I have to tell you. My colleague who works on Goal 2, Rachel Blum, when she got the newsletter, she said, this is great. I wish we did this. So really good feedback.
Thank you. We all appreciate it. A lot of people working behind the scenes to make this happen. It's like we're getting the decoration.
Wow.
So we have 300 recipients right now, and this number will grow as we get more and more members across the world. We have a 40 to 50% opening rate, which again in the industry we're seeing sometimes 15% is considered good. So it's like we attribute it to the idea that we really serve a need out there, and it's like it's hopefully well received by our recipients. So we talked about social media a little bit. So our plans on Twitter, we are already, and just to give you some statistics on here, we've got our Twitter handle, and then we've got 127 follows, and we did that or generated that with 71 tweets, some of them coming from Gwen right here, and different other things. But again, one of the questions we might want to consider here too is like, so how do we tweet? What do we tweet? How much approval does have to happen before tweet can go out? And Nina's shaking her head. I appreciate. We'll talk about that. But there are lots of little logistics you have to think about. Is it just Ash saying, "Oh, I want to tweet that," and he tweets on his behalf or ECCN behalf? Which kind of venues do we go to, and what's our strategy? How do we align that with any of the other communication that we send out, so it's not just the one spot? Then it's the discussion board. This is, I think, the knowledge share group. Some of you might have seen some of that already, and we'd like to have a discussion board also for the steering group committee, and I think we'll talk about that some more tomorrow, how we can do it. So behind, again, the login, you'll find a discussion forum, and we want to use that for, just to exchange ideas or discuss certain things. We're also right now on Google Docs. We have a Dropbox, and it's like all of that needs to be a bit more streamlined to figure out where we have our draft documents and how is it best to work with one another when we're not sitting in the same room. And last but not least, yeah, that's the big one into social media. We're doing a lot of research behind the scenes right now. It's like, how do we best reach colleagues in Africa? So it sounds like that seems to be more phone from my data that I got, and reaching into, the last corners. Asia seems to be very prominent with Facebook. So what does that mean to us? Are we serving all platforms? Which ones do we put where? It's like, how quickly can we turn things around? If you think about Twitter and those kind of social media, they live on the moment. So it's like if we have to go through a long vetting process, it's like almost defeats the purpose of the platform. So just thinking those things through is something we're really trying to work on. And so there are a couple of questions. So I alluded to that already. Who is a member and who is not, within the reference of the tour? And who do we want to serve really? How far down do we want to go? Are we present in Africa on text messaging, so everybody out there gets our text messages, and when do they get it and what do they get? And the year 2 we foreshadowed some of that already. So I think that's a quick overview of what we've done over the last few months. Yes.
Have you had a chance to discuss going in languages beyond English?
Yes.
I'm sure you've thought.
That's the goal as well.
Yeah.
I think we have talked about a couple of languages. The website, I think, will be the first one, how we're going to do all the social media in different languages. I think we cover a few languages on the team, so we'll definitely look into that too. Yes, that's a very good question. Maybe we have some languages amongst us here too. Arabic or those things, I think we're a little bit, we don't have that capacity, but we're looking into that, absolutely.
Since you talked about social media quite a bit, do you have an aggregator site that actually tracks hashtags and all that as well?
We're trying to do that. We're going to probably use Hootsuite to navigate some of those, and it's that's another thing, how do we all navigate and how can we stay on top of the analytics right now I use Google Analytics to kind of pull some of the data, but I see a rising trend, and you're shaking your head. I mean, that's one of the questions. If we're trying to get higher up on the website hits and other things, it's we need to deploy a slightly different strategy than if it's just pure about the content, and it's getting into the field might be a slightly different strategy. And Google rules the world to some extent with the analytics, but it's if you have YouTube, it brings you higher up than on other sites. LinkedIn is something we played around with, but didn't really see how that LinkedIn platform would really link to us and our network. We felt Facebook is probably the better platform for that. But yeah, there are lots of things to consider. And if you have any input on that, please find me and talk to me.
And just a thought here, one of the interesting pieces of this work for us, I think, on the support team is, as Nina mentioned, we're so fortunate that we have the resource of a support team, and we are there to do a lot of the heavy lifting. And Bettina, every one of the team members is really great in their role, and yet the direction and the thought, the strategy behind what we do, and communications is a good case. We look to you to help us with this. We can do a lot of it, but we don't want to make some of these important decisions on behalf of ECCN, because we want those to be decisions that ECCN as a network and you as a steering group support and have thought through, because many heads are better than fewer. So when you're considering this, part of you might be going, well, I don't need to think about that, that's your job, right? And part of that is true. But part of it really depends on you. And that, I think, is true for all of the discussions that we'll be having. So.
Is ECCN, are we considering it's not, so if we tweet something, will it reflect on USAID? Or we always have a disclaimer that says this is an organization, so.
Yeah, I mean, basically the rules around tweeting for USAID are very, they're very easy, right? I tweet on my own, so I have my Twitter handle and I tweet, and then USAID pushes out my tweets, or ECCN pushes out my tweets. And so you always, like you said, you have a disclaimer tweets are my own. But even for ECCN, I mean, it's not, I don't think it's something that anyone is that concerned about. The missions have their Twitter feeds, and they go out and they see things and they tweet about them. It's very I don't know what the right word is. They're not stringent guidelines around social media.
I would also recommend maybe having a hashtag that we agree on.
Yes.
More so than just a Twitter account, because Twitter accounts everyone can have. The way to track the conversation is through hashtags.
Absolutely.
So if you can have that, that's another way to keep track and actually count how many people actually mentioning that. That in itself is a
Exactly, for that we need some content, so we're looping right
Sure.
back. It's like, a hashtag without any content behind it is a little bit difficult, but our idea is really to kind of have all these different social media and the website kind of interplay with one another to get the most out of it and have synergistic activities happening between them. And we know different users use different platforms, so, how do we do it? Do we push it out like around big events? Or do we say we do it routinely every week, every month? I mean, there are different strategies we can do, and most likely it's going to be fluid between them. But yeah.
And again, these conversations will continue also into tomorrow, and a little seed. If you have particular interest in or expertise in any one of the areas that we described, we promise to respect your time. We did ask for an 8-hour-a-month commitment. We won't ask for more than that unless you freely give it. But we do hope that with those 8 hours, we can make the best possible use of your skills and expertise. So remember that as well. Okay, thank you.